Technology at Highwire, which is a part of Stanford University. Just to get a read on the audience, how many of you are librarians? Great. And how many are publishers? Okay, so it's about 60-40 with some others in there, maybe. And how many of you are familiar with Highwire? Most of you. So Highwire is a division of Stanford University. We are part of the library, but we're a separate entity, separate organization that provides technology and related services to publishers. Our mission, we are a mission-driven organization, and our mission is to help the scholarly publishers stay independent and thrive. So we are not-for-profit, but we're also not for loss. And we host the definitive online versions of almost 1,300 different publications on behalf of over 145 different publishers. And these publishers some of them are scholarly societies. In fact, most of them are. We have some university presses, as well as some associations and various other independent publishers. We're well known for the journals that we host, but we also host books and some databases, a few different sort of non-journal content like newsletters, things like that. And we're committed to, when we say this sort of half in jest, evidence-based publishing. Most of the folks that we publish are publishing evidence-based medicine or research. But we try to bring data into the realm of electronic publishing and learn from actual experimentation and data. So we now are focusing our attention both on ebooks as well as on the discoverability aspects of it. And why are we focusing this way? We focused our efforts on discoverability in the journal world, and we found that it actually transformed the online journal business. With early efforts that Highwire did with both the ANIs like PubMed and others, as well as work with Google, really, right from the beginning. Google started right across the hall from Highwire at Stanford, so we began working with them very early on. And what we saw was just an explosion in the usage of journals online, and an explosion in the discoverability, the findability of journals. So clearly, as more and more book content is going online, it's important to address how easy that content is to find. We have heard anecdotally and through many different surveys and studies that students, faculty, independent researchers have a lot of difficulty finding ebooks. Chris Warnock from eBrary was speaking earlier. They've done their own survey in 2008 of students, and they found that 49% of students never use ebooks. And of those, 57 reported it's because they couldn't find them. So it's clearly a big problem with ebooks. An ebook is a single publication event as opposed to a serial, which is, with a journal, you've got an ongoing online presence with content constantly being refreshed. With a book, it may be a single event, and that's a hard thing to track. It's hard for librarians to keep track of them all. It's hard for end users too. So it's really important to maximize the technology to make the content as easy to find as possible. A lot of the existing discovery frameworks, things like search engines, are not necessarily book-friendly. Google, for example, only indexes content if there's a free abstract or extract or portion of that content available. If there isn't, it's invisible to Google, and of course, if it's not in Google, it's quite difficult for people to find. The standards are still sort of all over the place. A great deal more work needs to be done with that. A lot of books don't yet have DOIs, and they are in a lot of different formats, so it can be difficult to disseminate them as widely as we'd like. We talk about discoverability and visibility at Highwire a lot, and what's the difference? Discoverability is about making the content easy to find when the user is actively looking for it, if they're performing searches. Whereas visibility we see as making the content visible when the user doesn't even know they're looking for it. in the early days of the online world, the focus for publishers was to get their content out there on a website, gather the users, and keep them there. Whereas we see now a more disaggregated strategy, which means getting the content out to the users wherever they happen to be, placing the content right in their workflow when they need it and how they need it. And so that's our focus on visibility. How do you actually do that? How do you make the content as easy to see as possible? Some examples of how this kind of breaks down is in discoverability, we focused a lot on optimizing searching and making the content, the search results as accurate as possible, getting at the top of the search results list, etc. Whereas with visibility, we're interested in making the content available as the user is just browsing or doing other behaviors. If they're reading one thing, how can you make sure that the reader is aware of other things that are related, that are specific to what they're doing in that very moment? How can you build on what you know about the user, even if it's an anonymous user using a website, to place things in their vision that are useful and helpful? While discoverability was more professionally defined in the sense that ANIs and search engines and things like that had specific rules and guidelines for optimizing. In the world of visibility, it's the user's behavior that defines what's available to them. We've seen an increase in recommendation engines that are tailored and tuned to a user. And users are using more of their own tools, which they have set parameters and preferences for finding things. And we want to make sure that we are actually thinking clearly about that and optimizing for it. So our approach is to work with the publishers that we host to help them get their content out there in the best way possible. In that sense, we're doing a Highwire-driven market research work to try and understand where ebooks are going. It's obvious that there's a lot of discussion around it. There's a lot of interest. There's everyone's saying things from ebooks are the future to ebooks are going to get Napsterized and there's no future for ebooks. I mean, you're seeing everything in between those two polar opposites. So, we're interested in helping the publishers that we work with understand and define their strategy. And because we have a strong relationship with the library community, we want to do that in a way that makes sense from that perspective as well. So we've looked a lot at what others have, other surveys and studies, and this is just a short list of many of the surveys and studies and reports that we've been looking at. These are some of the most interesting and definitive in the last year or so.